Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. This is our presentation of Discrete Structures Project Phase 2. I'm Abdullah Nasir with Afnan, Rizwan and Abu Bakr as my teammates. So let's first discuss the understanding of the input dataset.
So basically, understanding the dataset is the main core of every project we do. So this dataset shows the passes among the player in different football matches. So the first column of this dataset represents the start time of the pass in millisecond from the sender, and the second column represents the time of the pass in millisecond which is goes to receiver, and the third column represent the index of the player that is passing the ball, and fourth player likewise represent the index of the player that received the ball, and the rest of the columns are the positions of the player.
Now comes the point to derive a strategy to segregate passes. These following points are to be kept in mind in order to get .txt files out from the CSV files in the form of matches. The first one is to detect overlaps in starting and ending time. For example, if player A passes to player B in 2 seconds, and again player A passes to player B in 2 seconds, which leads us to a conclusion that both of these passes are not from the same match. The second one is detecting players' repetitions. For example, if player A passes the ball in 2 seconds to another player, whereas player C passes the ball to another player in 2 seconds, as the time period has now been same, it cannot be from the same match. The third one is the matching and receiving sending time of a ball with a constant time difference to be ignored, which basically means that the sending time will always be less than the receiving time, and a constant threshold has been set in the code. Now comes the point to discuss the Oberoi's code. The code in the repository implements algorithms for dynamic subgraph isomorphism. It aims to determine if a small graph, which is a pattern graph, matches part of a larger graph, which is a target graph. The key operations that are included in Oberoi's code is the graph representation. The graph representation uses the data structures like adjacency, lists, and matrices for efficient storage and traversal. The second one is isomorphism checking, which matches both of the target graph as well as the pattern graph in order to find isomorphic nature between them. And the third one is the dynamic updates. As far as the parameters of Oberoi's code is concerned, it takes target graph and pattern graphs and subsequently finds the isomorphic nature between them. As far as the input is concerned, the first line of input file consists the total number of nodes, and the next number of lines equal to number of nodes is the labeling of every node. The next line represents the total number of edges, and subsequently all of the next data represents the relationship between the edges as well as the nodes. The output of the Oberoi's code eventually tells us the isomorphic nature between the nodes of target graph and the pattern graph, and subsequently it also tells us about the relationship between the edges.
So now the demonstration of the working. Basically, what our code does is it takes an input a CSV file and it start reading from the very first row to the last row. What it does is basically it saves every row in different files. These rows represent the passes between the two players. What is our code is doing? It is saving the same passes, the passes which are between the same players or the same team, and different files, and it follows the pattern of the graphs. So when we open the files, we have a graph of the players whose edges are represented between the passes between the same players. So likewise, we have 14 matches and we have two different teams. So the 28 files will be made at the end. And in 28 files, we will have the graph of the passes which show the position of the teams in every match.
Now for the demonstration of the working of the Oberoi's code, we first need to understand what it takes in as an input. As already discussed, that the Oberoi's code takes in the generated target graphs. Like our on code actually separates and segregates the CSV file into 28 different files representing the passes between every team in every match. So Oberoi's code actually takes in those graphs and it compares and detects for the isomorphism in those graphs with already given pattern graphs. So as already discussed, we have generated a set of 28 files. The Oberoi's code takes in those files, and in the end it provides us with all the isomorphic patterns as its output. So now let's discuss the code implemented by our group. So as the four columns of the CSV file are of concern, that is the time of starting of the pass, the end time of the pass, the sender ID and the receiver ID. The rest of the columns show the positions, so we are not using those positions to be very precise. So we make a structure named pass with all these entities. So first of all, we need to read the CSV and save the data of each row individually in all these variables. Using a while loop, we are segregating all these values and we are assigning it to the respective variables, and we are storing the passes in a vector array. Once we get all these passes saved in a vector array, now we want to filter it on the basis of teams and matches. So what we are doing at first is we are filtering the passes that are done only within a team. We are not counting those passes that are being done across the teams. For example, if team 1 is passing to a player of team 1, we are saving that pass, but we are ignoring the one when team 1 passes to team 2. So how are we going to implement it? As we know that the indexes of the players start from 1 and end to 28. The first 14 indexes of the players are of team 1, whereas the second team consists of the players from the index 15 to 28. So we have set the start and the end ID of each group, and we are segregating the passes on the basis of passes to the same team. So our for loop actually compares the sender's start ID and the end ID and makes sure that the pass is between the players of the same match. So through this we get a filtered passes of the team. Next now it's time to create the graphs. Once we have the filtered passes, now we want to create the graphs from them. And how we do that? We compare the timestamps. As already mentioned by Afnan, that if player A passes to player B, and player B passes to player C, then the time span of receiving the ball by player B and the time span of sending of ball by player B must be same or must be close. So what we do is we compare the start time, we compare the time of receiving, and then we compare the time of sending. So and there we count the difference. We have set a constant difference that is ignorable. For example, if player A has passed ball to player B and player B has received it on 3 seconds, then player B has to pass it within the range of 3 to 5 seconds. So we do this by comparing it within a loop of all the iterations. So we are actually saving all this data in a map, and map consists of a pair and an integer. The pair consists of the sender and the receiver's ID, and the integer has the number of passes between them. So we are also counting the number of passes so that we can generate a graph that can be comparable with the Oberoi's code. So once graphs are generated, it's time to save them in the file as required by the Oberoi's code. So Oberoi's code requires the number of edges between between two nodes. So as we already counted those nodes, so we just print them in the file and save it in the form of graph. So this is the output of our code. So first from player 0 to 18, one team only consists of 14 players, but we have assigned 18 indices. The other 5 extra indexes are not being used actually. So we'll count just the indexes from 0 to 13. That makes 14 players. This is the output that shows the number of passes between the players and the number of edges that are generated between the players.
As far as the analysis obtained by the results of the code is concerned, unfortunately, the graphs made by our code were not precise, due to which the isomorphism wasn't detected properly. But I would like to pitch a new approach. Initially, the approach that we are using is that we extract in total of 28 files from the CSV files. 2 files represents the data of a single match. But the approach that we could have used is that first we would extract the data of team 1 from the CSV file into a single folder, and then extract the data of the team 2 into another folder. These folders will consist of the sub CSV files from the major CSV file. And then later on, we could have used these CSV files to generate TXT files of different teams, and through those teams, we could have given it to Oberoi in order to generate an isomorphic nature. The importance of this approach is that when we divide the whole process into 2 different processes, the precision of our code would have been greater, due to which we could have expected a precise result from the Oberoi's code. Currently, the approach that we have used and provided the target graphs to the Oberoi code gives us the output in this manner. It represents the number of solutions that have been given by the Oberoi code, as well as the time taken for the Oberoi code. That was all from our side. Thank you.